Divorce can be really hard. I know because I've gone through it twice. Divorce and kids, there's nothing good about it, but you can make it better.
So, Susan, what were your experiences going through divorce? Because, like you said, you've been through two of them. Can you kind of just, talk to us
Yeah.
about those experiences?
Yeah. Divorce is never something you want to happen, but sometimes it's inevitable. And it's hard when you have kids. And so when I say I've been through it twice, I've been through it on both ends. So I went through it as a kid, as a teenager. I was 14. My brother was 12. I remember the day my mom called me into her bedroom and she told me that my parents were getting a divorce. She and my dad were going to get a divorce. And it just, the fear welled up instantly, anger welled up. I was mad at her. Um, she was the one leaving my dad. And I remember leaving the house and running to my best friend's house and crying and, her helping me and all that. And then after that initial shock, going through it all, having my dad leave and live somewhere else. And in the back in those days, the moms always pretty much got the kids.
Hmm.
So I would see my dad every other weekend or something like that. He wanted to see us all the time. But at that time, my parents were not happy. They were not. It wasn't. They were angry at each other.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the best. So when my mom would say things about my dad pretty much didn't say anything about my mom, but my mom would say things, and or I had to carry the message. Tell your dad this or
Mm,
whatever. And I hated that. I
yeah.
hated that I had to be the in between.
Yeah. The
And
middle
I loved my
person.
dad so much. And to see him hurting, and, he did the best he could. He tried not to put anything on us, but it was difficult. And the funny
Yeah.
thing is I knew it was, I knew inside it's probably going to happen because my parents used to yell all the time at each other.
Hmm.
I remember as a kid, I remember going in between them and saying, "Stop yelling at each other," you
Yeah.
know? And I remember talking to my friends and saying, "I don't know, my parents might be getting a divorce because they're yelling all the time. I can't
Hmm.
stand it." So, anyway, going through all of that growing up was really tough.
Yeah.
And, there were ways that they did not handle it well.
Mm,
There were ways that, like I said, pitting me in the middle, like I'm supposed to deliver the messages, that kind of thing. And
yeah.
then not being able to see my dad all the time. And um, it's hard.
Yeah. I can.
Eventually
Yeah.
it changed. But
I'm
yeah.
sorry. I just wanted to say something. I was gonna ask about your brother because you said that, you had a brother and at the time he was 12, right?
Hmm.
What was it like for him and also just the two of you kind of going through that together? Was it easier that you had him or was it even harder because you were an older sibling? Like what was that dynamic like as well?
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember a whole lot about him because I was so
Mm-hmm.
self-centered on me, but I know that we did sort of comfort each other because we had to be alone together a lot because then all of a sudden my mom is now having to make a living, so she's gone more, and because she's having to work. I mean, I think she was working before, but she had to work more, so we spent a lot more time alone.
Yeah.
And you know that has its challenges as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we go through and look at it, my brother, my mom died early. She died when I was 20 and my brother was 18 or 17, I think, actually. And he had harder time with it because he was so mad at my mom because he felt like she was never there for him. Because I left the house to go to college. He was alone with her and she was working all the time, and he
Yeah.
felt stuff. So anyway, it's hard all the way around. And my mom tried her
Mm,
best. She was very loving. She tried her best. I don't blame her at all. She was not happy in the marriage, and she had to do this.
yeah.
So growing up, that was my experience. But then I married, and I've got 3 kids, and um, I was married for 26 years. It wasn't the best marriage, and I don't know why I stayed in it out of fear or whatever. But once you have kids, then you feel like, nope, I got to make this work. I got to make this work because of my kids. And I had 3 kids. But by the time, interestingly enough, my 2 youngest were the same age as my brother and I, 14 and 12. My oldest was in college, first year of college. And I just couldn't be in it anymore. And I was not happy. I was just realizing that I did not want to do this to my kids. And guess what? We fought a lot too,
Hmm.
interestingly enough. So that was the hardest thing because I had been through it. And I'm like, how am I going to do this now to
Yeah.
my kids? So it
Because
was
you knew what it
difficult.
felt like.
I knew what it felt like. I wanted to make sure that it didn't hurt them like it hurt me.
Mm,
But I don't think it's going to hurt no matter what. I think it's going to hurt no matter what. But it's how
yeah.
you support them going through it. And I think I did some things well, and I think I did some things not so well. Um, I remember when the 4 of us, because my son, other oldest, was out of the house. He was off in college, so I had to tell him differently. But telling the 2 younger ones at the dinner table that we're getting a divorce, and they just, you know, that same shock I felt, they felt it too. And I tried to say it in a way, like, we're still going to be friends, which didn't end up happening for a long time. Thought it was going to happen, but more to that's
Yeah.
a story for another day. But anyway, um, it changed their world just like it
Mm,
changed mine. And I lived in the house for a little while, and then I moved away. I got another place.
yeah.
And that's where everything started to happen. And he turned on me and did some things that were not kind, were
Hmm.
actually detrimental to my financial things and all that. And the one thing I regret is as I said some things to my kids, or I say it out loud and they heard it, that I'm saying about their dad,
Mm,
which was negative. So if you're going through a divorce, or you've already gone through divorce, highly recommend do not say anything negative about your ex-spouse,
yeah.
the father or mother of your children,
Yeah.
because that only hurts them.
Yeah.
Because in most majority of cases, both parents love their kids, and the kids love the parents. And when you start to say negative things about their parent, it hurts them because they
Yeah.
don't. You're saying bad things about my parent, and that hurts,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
as advice for somebody who's going through this, as hard as it is, you want to just say something so they know how this person is hurting you or whatever, or hurting them, but they don't know it. Don't say it.
Yeah.
Don't say it. And I'd say try to ask them how they're feeling. Listen. Don't tell them to get over it. Just tell them, I know it's hard. Empathize. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really it's a tough situation, I think, because especially when you're the parent, you're thinking about your kids and the family, but at the same time, within that family, you have the relationship with your spouse, right?
Hmm.
And I've heard a lot of stories of parents staying together for the kids, but then the kids grow up in this very like traumatic environment inside the household because there
Yeah.
are just constant fights.
Yep.
But then on the flip side, if the parents do separate, then that's another sort of like form of trauma if you think about it, because then now they
Hmm.
don't get to see both parents all the time. And
Yeah.
like you said, there's a relationship with each one. And I remember when I was living with my ex-girlfriend's family, her parents were div well, are divorced. And it was there was a lot of like the mom would talk about the dad and the dad would talk about the mom to the kids. There was a lot of that going on, and I was actually
Hmm.
able to witness it from an outsider's perspective almost, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
obviously not one of the kids, and I was seeing how it would impact the relationship that the kids had with their parents,
Ah,
whether
interesting.
the mom would say something about the dad to the kids, and then they'd almost be influenced by what was said and change their perception of their dad, right? When
Hmm.
it has nothing to do with them. It has to do with the relationship that the mother and the father had together,
Yeah.
right? And like you said, it is very delicate. Like it's something that even from what I've seen, it's a no-go. You should definitely not, talk down or talk bad about your ex-partner or your ex-husband or your ex-wife or whoever if because you don't know how that's going to impact and almost break or shatter something within your kids
Right.
because they have their
Yeah.
own individual relationship with
Exactly.
each parent.
Hmm.
So I think that's a really important thing that you brought up. And I do have a question for you, Susan,
Hmm.
because obviously now you've married again, and I'm sure you've had time to you know go through your own process of whether it's healing and growth and all of that stuff and looking back and learning. Do you think that what you experienced as a kid had any sort of influence or impact on that relationship that you had with your ex-husband
That's a great
in
question.
any way?
I think I'm in therapy right now.
I'm
That's a
not a
great
therapist,
question.
so.
It is kind of ironic that I almost repeated what I saw. So I grew up with parents who fought
Mhm.
and went through a divorce at 12 or 14, and my brother at 12.
Yeah.
I then get into a marriage where honestly, it was it was rocky 3 years in, and then circumstances happen, and then you better it, and all this goes like this. But it wasn't really a good one because we fought a lot. We didn't, so I kind of like mimicked what I grew up with,
Mm.
and I saw a lot of fighting, and I had a lot of anger. Well, because I wasn't in, he's the father of my children. I love him for that. We are friends now, which is nice,
Yeah.
which is really nice, and the kids appreciate that. But I was almost like modeling what I saw from my parents. And, they always, I made choices of why I married him. I don't know, but it's a weird thing. So I think we need to be aware of what we grew up with, that
Yeah.
that's not always the way we should be,
Yeah.
you know? I know that now. I know that now. And so I worked really hard to try to forgive him for the things he did. He's forgiven
Hmm.
me now, and it's a lot better. But I do regret some of the behaviors that I did.
Yeah.
Definitely regret that my kids had to grow up, because now in this day and age, it's not the mom always gets the kids. And we wanted to be fair, because when we were going into this, I didn't want to hurt him. I wanted to make as kind as possible.
Yeah.
So we had equal custody. So I know my kids, I loved it when they were with me, and it was hard when they were gone. But they tell me now that I hated having to go back and forth and where's my stuff and all that,
Yeah.
so hard. Um, I think when for your kids, when you're going through all this and are you in separate homes, and if they're going back and forth or whatever, to really make it as easy as possible on them by having like their own stuff at each place so that they don't have to. I remember having to, oh, I gotta pack this and this and this and this
Mm,
and take it with me. Instead, just get double, or whatever. Um, and just empathy and open discussion and apologizing that you had to put them through this. It wasn't something you had to do. I mean,
yeah.
that you wanted to do. I mean, before I made that decision, I'm gonna be really vulnerable here. Before I made that decision, I remember being in the garage, down on the ground, in the dark, before I was making this decision to ask for the divorce, talking to my sister-in-law and just crying and going, I can't do this. What about my kids? What about my kids? What about my kids? And it was the hardest decision I've ever made,
Yeah.
but it had to be done because I couldn't keep, I couldn't keep in there. So, and it's better now. It's all done really well and kids are doing great, but
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. And
it's a tough one.
it is. It is. And I do think that one of the takeaways from at least what I'm hearing is that sometimes you have to go through the pain in order to heal and then see things better in the future and
Mm-hmm.
experience things better in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it might seem like, yeah, you're maybe, I don't know, calling it like you're ripping the family apart by getting a divorce, and the kids are gonna have to go from one place to the other, and they're not gonna be with both of their parents and all that stuff. Sure, that might be true. But the other side to it is if the parents do stay together and they're miserable and they're fighting all the time, that can also have a very, very strongly negative impact on the kids,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like understanding like we're all individuals,
Mm-hmm.
right? We have to make sure that we are taken care of before we're able to take care of anyone else.
Yeah.
And from a parent's perspective, right? Whether you're a father or mother, it doesn't matter. Like if you aren't happy and if you aren't okay, then you're not going to be able to take care and be there for your kids either. That's just
Mm-hmm.
the way it is,
Yeah.
right? You can
Yeah.
act,
So true.
you can do your best and act it out and act as if everything's okay, even though it's not. But at some point, it's going to catch up to you. It's inevitable,
Yeah.
right? So, like the decision that you had to make, Susan, like you said, it was such a hard decision, but it had
Mm.
to be made for you. And in many ways, it had to be made for your kids as well, so that they could, you know, like now I don't know how many years it's been, but now, like where you're at right now, what all of you are at right now as a family, like things are better,
Yeah.
right? Like
Things
you
are
said,
better.
you're friends with your ex-husband,
Mm-hmm.
your kids are they're happy and they appreciate the fact that, you do have a relationship with their father,
Yeah.
right? It's obviously not the same
Mm-hmm.
relationship that you had before, but at least there's something, at least it's positive. There's no,
Yeah.
you know, it's nothing negative. And I think that's important. It's important to have this example that you just shared, and thank you for sharing it.
Mm-hmm.
That just shows like, you know, this is part of life. It happens, and sometimes you have to make these hard decisions in order to, come out stronger.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
oftentimes when you're going through the divorce and even after the divorce, there's so much anger,
Mm,
you know. Usually it's, I mean, unless it's been a mutual decision and all that, that's different. But oftentimes there's so much anger between the
yeah.
two parents that you really got to work hard because it's hard because you're going through it to
Yeah.
not put that on your kids, not let them be a part of any of that anger,
Yeah.
you know, just love them, just love them. and then work hard to get through that anger, and possibly with your ex to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to be friends, but at least be cordial and kind like you would to anyone else,
Yeah.
which is hard to say in a lot of situations, but strive for that, because that will help your kids in the long run.
Yeah.
If they can see that, yes, mom and dad are not together anymore, but I mean, I was married for 26 years. That's a long time to be with someone.
Yeah.
You know, I know everything about him. He knows everything about me. And, you know, we're friends now. We don't see each other all the time, but you're going to see each other when when graduations happen and marriages happen and all this stuff. You're going to be together in some capacity for the rest of your lives because of your
Yeah.
kids. So do the best to mend that.
Yeah.
Whether, and if, even if it's hard for you and you're like, you're doing it not for you, you're doing it for your kids.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And Susan, one last thing, and this is more
mhm.
for me. This is a question that I have for you,
Okay.
and it's not so much about parenting or anything like that. It's about relationships.
Okay.
What advice would you give to someone who is looking to have a healthy relationship moving forward that is long term, with everything that you've experienced, whether it was with your parents or your own personal experiences as well? What are the things to look out for? What are the things to avoid in your opinion?
Okay. I can tell you why I got married
Hmm.
the first time. I think I got married young. I was 23. And I think I did because I didn't think I could take care of myself. And I go back, I think we've talked about this before, but my dad always took care of me. And so I went straight from my dad taking care of me to getting married and being taken care of, because
Yeah.
I didn't have the confidence to take care of myself.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I would say, is make sure you're not getting married or getting in a relationship because you're insecure about what you can do and you're looking to someone else to take care of you, because
Hmm.
that is a disaster. Okay. Um, make sure that you got to work on yourself, and you got to know that you're confident in yourself, because you're not going to get it from somebody else. So I would say that's it. And then um I think my parents got married back in the day. I think my mom was 25 and my dad was 30.
Hmm.
And back in the day, my mom, that was like, oh, we're getting to that spinster, it's like, oh, you're an old maid.
Hmm.
So I think, that was what sort of cemented that marriage. It was like,
Hmm.
we're getting too old. We got to get married, and you're pretty good. So, you know, make sure you're madly in love. make
Yeah.
sure and make sure that you respect each other and treat each other well, and are confident to be on your own
Mm,
before you make that together.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Susan. Thank you for sharing your story and for
Mhm.
opening up. I think that this was very not only helpful but also inspiring and relatable to quite a few, parents out there. And yeah, just appreciate you for sharing your story.
Yeah. It's it was tough, but you make it through it. And now I'm married to an amazing man who I absolutely adore, and our marriage is good. And he helped raise the kids because they were still in the home, and they love their stepdad, and he loves them very much. So now it's even a bigger family. And actually, my ex-husband and my husband get along, so we're good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, this is a deep one.
Yeah, but thanks. Thanks again, Susan, for sharing your story and you know,
Mhm.
I think we all appreciate it. We do.
Good. I hope it helps someone. So,
Yeah.
All right, until next week, next Friday.
Boom, boom, boom.
And if anybody is getting divorced or has questions and needs help with that, I've gone through it on both sides. So feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to support you or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And otherwise, please subscribe, follow, comment, share if this gave you some value. Yeah, we'd appreciate it. And then
Yes, we
also,
would.
if you need some five top five parenting tips, download for free. Links right down there somewhere.
In the description.
Yep.
It's like we've rehearsed this season. I feel like we're so in
No.
sync. It's like and five t boop 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 boop. It's really good. We're getting good at this. We're getting better. All
All righty. All right.
right.
See you next
Take
week.
care, everyone.
Have a good one. Love on each other. Love your kids.